A week before commissioning, I was called in to be told that I would not be receiving my commission. That was hard. That was actually devastating. I was overweight is the reason because I was pregnant. So how far the military has come since 1988 with dealing with women and pregnancy. The irony was I had maintained my weight to the military standard of pregnant women so that I wouldn't be overweight. And then they were like, that's fine. You're going to be fine. You can lose the weight, have the baby and lose the weight, and you'll be back. That didn't happen. I lost my mind and I couldn't find my way back. I ended up having my son, again, becoming homeless, being with my ex-husband for 10 years, finally waking up one day and said, I'm not doing this anymore after 2 kids, remembered who I was. I looked myself in the mirror and said, get your shit together. You will be everything that you said you never would be.
Welcome to Your Story Doesn't End Here, the mental health podcast of military and veterans who refuse to be silenced. I'm your host, Rachel, and my mission with this podcast is to be a voice for those who don't have a voice, bring awareness to mental health issues, provide value and solutions, and to change the culture when it comes to mental health within the DoD organizations. Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming back for another episode of Your Story Doesn't End Here. Today's guest is Mary Elizabeth Himes, who is an emerging poet living in Whidbey Island, Washington. A native of Santa Monica, California, she moved to Washington State in 2017 with her spouse, Craig. She received her BA in Liberal Studies with a focus on media and culture from Chapman University. She's a businesswoman, community leader, and a lover of words. Mary Elizabeth has been writing her whole life, and in 2003, she began performing her work at open mic events as a form of therapy. She self-published her first book of work, Learning the Truth About Beauty, in 2005. After a 10-year break, Mary Elizabeth began writing again in 2017 and presenting her work in public in 2021. With the support of family and the extraordinary creative community on Whidbey Island and all of the Pacific Northwest, Mary Elizabeth is boldly stepping into her gift as a poet. Her work covers the perspectives of various social and personal viewpoints around gender, sexuality, family, aging, and mental health and protest. In 2023, she performed her work for events sponsored by Pomoja Place, Leadership Whidbey, Big Brothers and Sisters of Island County, the Whidbey Institute, and local galleries. In 2024, she will work with Oak Harbor, Washington to facilitate expressive writing courses for youth and plans to publish her next book of original work. And I believe you've already started to do that, Mary, as of the time of this recording. So super exciting. But thank you so much, first of all, for being here on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. This has been a long time coming. So really excited for this conversation and to hear more about you. I think one of my favorite things about podcasts is like, I've known you for a while, but I feel like I get to know people on a deeper level when I hear their story in this platform. So I'm really excited for that. But before we get into your story today, if there is one word or a few words you could use to describe how you are feeling going into this recording, how would you describe that?
Today, in particular, feeling determined, a little, just and specifically about today, determination as things pile up. I'm determined to get through the things that I said I was going to do today. And there's a bigger scope to that. You can say today or the continuing things that happen to us on a day-to-day basis. So you have to be, so determination today, specifically as the top of the list.
I love it.
Just get it done.
Yeah, that's a good feeling to have, honestly. I'm going to pass it off to you now to share your story with the listeners.
Oh, okay. Mary Elizabeth. I came to Whidbey Island in 2017 from Los Angeles, Orange County, California, actually. I'm moving here after my husband retired. I spent 17 years working at Auto Club of Southern California and was not sure how I was going to transition away from California. I had never lived away from quote unquote home. But I had manifested moving to Washington in around 1986 or 7 when I came here to Fort Lewis for officer training camp for my 6 weeks officer training corps training, and was struck and in love with Washington. and was like, oh, when I get old, I'm going to move to Washington. And there I am. I'm old and living in Washington, but manifested, I think, in so many ways. Having met my husband, and he's like, oh, I have a house in Washington. Oh, really? So, but I was always going to move here, regardless of who I was going to meet. But the universe kind of lays tracks for you to get to where you're going if you are really about that. So, my story again, I grew up in Santa Monica, California, in Southern Cal, West Los Angeles area. I went to public schools and private schools, always involved in community. I was raised Catholic, which is really rare amongst African Americans. Went to Catholic school, have always been nonconforming and rebellious. Was lucky enough in seventh grade to go to a school with a teacher, Sister Susan, who was encouraging of my rebellion and of my nonconformity in certain ways. We're actually still friends. And around, I believe, seventh grade is when I actually started writing and finding words and trying to write my story or a story. Spent lots of time in libraries and kind of escaping. So that's the general piece, but the emotional piece is that I am the daughter of a teen mother who was 17 when she had me in 1965. With all of that struggle with my mom, as her growing along the way as a toddler, I was abused and without my mother's knowledge. And that formed a lot about me along the way. When I was about 40, went to the doctor because a friend said I needed help. And I was like, I don't need any help. I'm fine. And it's like, darling, you need some help or talk to someone. I ended up actually getting some help and some medication because I wasn't really aware that I was mentally ill. I was having mental illness. I just kind of surrounded myself with crazy Mary. Mary, you're so crazy. You're crazy. I had always been crazy. It wasn't like this new thing where adult people were saying you're crazy. Like I was always the crazy kid, even, like I seem normal, but I know that I'm not normal. I was a headbanger, highly aggressive and violent to anyone who threatened me in any kind of way. I was literally fearless, like in so many ways when threatened. And so that showed up in the disciplinary issues in school. I didn't get along well with people. I avoided people. I became very introverted, hence spending a lot of time in the library, books becoming my friends, not having real friends, not falling into any particular group. I was really hanging out with boys was a lot easier than hanging out with girls. I didn't have to perform at any level with boys except to like pick me on your team because she plays hard. So I found validation in that. But as I got older, the issues continued to show up, especially in the workplace. I'm very smart. So in high school, I was a joiner. So I played basketball, softball, volleyball. I was in band. I was in chorus. I worked 2 jobs in the summer. So that was my like teen life. And I also had like church and I started youth group and I was in 2 choruses. So I was always very occupied with things. And somewhere in the 12th grade, things changed. I lost my best friends moved away, basically. And they had been my friends for like 3 years and we had bonded and I didn't realize it until recently that once they had gone away, my spiral kind of happened or my stuckness happened. I went to college, but I didn't know what to do. I was very good in school and everything too, as well, but I just didn't have a place. And I lost my place when my friends were gone. And I didn't realize that. And I fell into boys, not boyfriends. So early on, I devalued myself to the part where I wasn't girlfriend material. I was side chick or kind of girl material. Like guys like to talk to me or be with me, but they didn't want their friends to know that they were with me or that I was with them. And so it was like, you know, always hiding. Like, so by the time I got to my 18, I think, I met my first husband. Bad choice. Never meet a guy in a bus stop. But I spent 10 years with him. 10 years of not being in a good place. 10 years in the 80s in South Central LA, having the whole snowfall experience, kind of being him being addicted to crack and me working, and then eventually becoming homeless, having a baby, becoming homeless, living downtown Los Angeles in a flea bag hotel, working as a waitress at Sizzler every single day so that I could make enough money to pay the rent at the hotel with a small child, and not having enough money to buy milk. And I remember I breastfed my oldest son till he was like 2. And sometimes I didn't have the breast milk and I would buy him the horchata. And my life was pretty broken. My family was not available to me. I had fallen from grace because of the choices I made to be with this person, my ex-husband. And that was in itself. So you have some family issues that come up that were just that my mom didn't know I was molested until I was 27. I didn't tell her that. Along the way, you also have some of the things that come along with a parent who had you when they were a child. And so you are kind of the guinea pig of all things as that person grows through life. And loving you as much as they know how to, and giving you as much as they know how to give, but not always knowing how to give it. My mom is an amazing person who also has had her own difficulties and struggles. And there's a lot of grace in being her daughter, because I've learned so much about, like we talked about today, like determination. As my mom, the growing up piece with my mom, and although I was molested, my mom didn't know it. My mom's life kind of got better as she married my stepdad. And I know I'm jumping around, right? But she married my stepdad, and that was after molestation for me. And the way that my brain was as a toddler was that I was so traumatized, I can say that now, that I actually waited for the time when my stepdad would be the molester. I waited, and I was waiting for that time to happen. It never happened. I love him so much for that. Like, nobody knows like why I love him so much. He never like hurt me, like not the way that I could be hurt. He never took advantage of my vulnerability. He was like my dad. He took care of me, taught me so much. And even though he was also a drug addict, he made the time for me to teach me how to play baseball, how to play basketball, how to do all those things that I was excelling in high school. He taught me those things. And I think part of that was to make him like proud of me, be the boy, be the son he didn't have, even though I had a brother. But I was like, that was the way to the top, right? Of attention or care or value. But he was also abusive to my mom. And I was a full eyewitness of that. And balancing that is hard sometimes. And by the time I got to high school, that same year that I'm talking about losing my friends, and I think by the time those last 2 years of high school, the same thing with my father, who his addictions became even huger. And now he was stealing things from me, and his disconnect from me was really bad, to the part was like, I don't want to be your daughter. And he's like, I don't care. And not really realizing that I really wasn't his daughter. I was his stepdaughter. But those were hard times, I think, which led me to make choices with partners that were not good for me, because it was safety, and at least knowing that I wasn't value really high, but at least I was with someone who maybe I was high on their list of good, you know. And I ended up staying with my first husband for 10 years. And one day I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, if I stay with this guy, I'm not gonna have any teeth in my head, and I'm gonna have a scarred up face. I'm too pretty for this life. And I decided to stop the roller coaster of abuse and the drugs and get off. And this was after I had done my military training as well, because I forgot that part. So these traumas come in like bam, bam, bam. I had gone to college and decided to join our Army ROTC. And my I came home and my mom said, I told her I was really excited because I hadn't joined any other thing. I joined this, and my mom said, I hope this isn't one of your tomboy stunts. Wow. So that was like the quality or the level of thought that the exchanges that I would have with my mom. Everything was a stunt, and I was very opposing, and I didn't follow rules, and you know, but so I joined the Army ROTC, and I was in it. And I mean, I did my 3.5 years. The biggest part, which is similar to now, is that my senior assignment was to create a mentor program for other cadets, for the incoming and the outgoing cadets. I did a good job with that at Cal State Long Beach. Wonder if it's still going, but it was something that I was really proud of, and I was ready to get my commission. I was really proud of that work, and I was proud to be a member of the group of men and women, especially the bonding of coming to Washington and being on Mount Rainier and getting lost, and then all of the work that goes into it, to becoming a soldier, but also to becoming an officer. And I was ready for that work. When I got back, I got married from that trip. When I got back from my 6 weeks Army training, I ended up getting married to the crackhead. And then I got pregnant right away, but I was still in school. I went to Region. I said, sir, I'm pregnant. Should I stop now and put on hold my whole, officer training? This is the last piece. No, no, no. And at that time, my name was Washington. No, Washington, you're fine. You're good. You come this far, you're going to be fine. Region says you're okay. So we go through, and then we're like 9 months of that. A week before commissioning, I was called in to be told that I would not be receiving my commission. That was hard. That was actually devastating. I was overweight is the reason, because I was pregnant. So how far the military has come since 1988 with dealing with women and pregnancy. The irony was I had maintained my weight to the military standard of pregnant women, so that I wouldn't be overweight. And then they were like, that's fine. You're going to be fine. You can lose the weight, have the baby and lose the weight, and you'll be back. That didn't happen. I lost my mind. I ended up failing every class, not realizing I had postpartum depression, all of these things. And the university actually gave me credit back for all of the failed classes of that semester. My last semester, I failed all of those classes. And I couldn't find my way back. I couldn't find my way back. I ended up having my son, again, becoming homeless, being with my ex-husband for 10 years. Finally waking up one day and said, I'm not doing this anymore after 2 kids. Remembered who I was. I looked myself in the mirror and said, get your shit together, or you will be everything that you said you never would be. And you've put in the work. You didn't go to college to end up like this. You didn't go to private school to end up like this. You did not do the work to end up like this. And so I said to my husband, in 1 year, I will not be this person anymore. So you can come along or not. And I went about making the corrections needed in my person and my work. I had been a waitress up until that time. And I went to work and I said, I want to be a manager. I have the management training. I'm not doing the work. So then I ended up becoming a manager and doing management work and elevating my income in a way. or at least status, and then continuing to push. And when a year came, he wasn't ready. And I left him. I left him in an apartment that was paid for and said, it's all done, it's paid. And I took a milk crate of things. And I think what made me leave him for sure was I couldn't find my son's Tonka truck. The Tonka toy was missing because he had sold the toys. My kids couldn't have toys. And so I just left with nothing. I left with a literal plastic milk crate of stuff, and I left. What he had known is that I had taken one paycheck and given it to a down payment for an apartment. The lady literally took my paycheck. I just signed it over to her. And then the next time I took my next paycheck and I signed it over to her again. And me and my sons moved into an empty apartment. And when I moved into that apartment, I cashed my check again. And I asked for all 20s and $1 bills. And then I took the money and I threw it in every room in that apartment. And my son said, Mom, there's money on the floor. I said, leave it alone because nobody is going to take it. And that was like 1993. Soon after that, I met my second husband, had my daughter. That's a whole roller coaster as well. These choices that I'm making with my partners are always something that puts me in a secondary position as a partner, because I believe that growing up, I wasn't raised to be a hoe or a housewife. I was raised to make sure that I took care of myself. So I never needed a partner, a man to take care of me. And there's value in that in some ways, but then there's also the people that I ended up choosing that valued that, but also it didn't allow them to be their full selves as well, or it allowed for me to be taken advantage of, however you want to look at it. But again, the lesson is in the living. And at some point, I decided that I wasn't going to hold my ex-husband, my first husband, responsible for the things that had happened to me or the things that we had been through. Because once I acknowledged that he's abusive, he's on drugs, he's doing these things. And as long as I had known that and I hadn't decided to do anything about it, I was 100% responsible for my inaction. I had to find the place in myself to make a change. And he wasn't responsible for that. I was. And so that was part of the letting go of the weight of, this motherfucker and nobody made me anything. I knew better. I had better goals. I was better than him. I mean, and we're so raised to like, you're not better than anyone. I'm better. And I had to dig into myself and say, as a human being, we come here and we are all on an equal plane, but by our choices, we create our value. And I was better than him. That's it. As far as whatever I was willing or going to contribute to this universe, this life, to my children, to my neighbors, to my family, I was better. I'm still better. And if that's arrogant, then okay, I'm gonna be arrogant with it. But those are seeds planted in myself over time that I continue to build on, but I still come to this plateau in life where I'm a single after my second husband left me. I lost my house. I bought a house. We lived in Compton. I bought a house in Compton. But my husband, who was older than me, a Mexican national, older than me, very proud, hardworking man, but also he had some mental illness. And that became the overriding issue with us in many things. He would only do the work that he was trained to do. I'm like, dude, we have 4 kids in a house. You need to do any work. And I was willing to do any work. So there was a point in time that I worked 3 jobs. I was a manager at Toys R Us. I sold life insurance, and I worked graveyard waitress at Denny's to try to make it work, to try to hold it together, to try not to fail. Because at this stage, I had overcome the homelessness, being married to a crackhead. I had had a good job that I ended up quitting, and that quitting had repercussions because now I ended up with these trying to do these other things. And I want to stop in the middle of that quitting. Revenge is not sweet. I quit because I had an employee who was sabotaging the workplace, and the employee was sabotaging my work and my reputation. And I think this is after I had my third child after this. I mean, my fourth, my youngest. So I had now had 4 kids. And so I had gone on an LOA and I came back and I said, I'm not gonna work here anymore because I wanted him to fail. Because the only way that I could get people to know that this guy was lying and a failure and not doing what he said and stealing from the company was if I quit. So I planned it all out. I planned my own exit. And that worked out because the guy really was found out that he was stealing, that he was lying. All of those things happened. But on my trajectory, I ended up losing my house, working 3 jobs, and basically almost becoming homeless because I ended up having to live with the extra home of a relative and not being able to even pay that. But the struggle, right? Do you fall down and quit or do you keep going? And so I had no car, I had no driver's license, I had nothing. I couldn't do anything. And I ended up getting a job 40 miles away from the house and working in insurance. And I rode the bus every day, 4 or 5 hours. In the middle of the working, after working a year, my second husband decided that life was just too much for him. And he left me with 4 kids, met me with 2 and left me with 4. So now I have 4 kids to raise alone with minimal income, with 1 income. And I had already got my car repoed, everything. No car, no insurance, repoed car. It was all bad. No driver's license. I didn't have a welfare check at that time. I was all working, work, work, work. And my kids would be at home alone. From the time I left in the morning, I would leave at 5 in the morning. I would get home at 10 o'clock at night. And I did that every day. If I worked 6 days a week. And then the days that I was home, and this is the mental illness, I would lock myself in a room. I didn't talk to my kids. I didn't interact with them. When I did interact, I was angry. I was screaming at them. And that went on for a long time. I was lucky enough to get Section 8 and be able to move closer to my job. And that allowed me not to be late for work. I was always on edge, going to be late, going to get written up, going to lose my job. But I'm very good at relationships. And my hard work always spoke for me. And so my managers really worked with me a lot of times. So I ended up staying with that company for 17 years. And I started in the call center and I worked my way up little by little. Again, being determined. Not letting the obstacles stop me and quit. I had breast cancer in the middle of that. And again, how long am I off? Even when I got breast cancer, it wasn't like a sad thing. I was like, okay, do we need a full remodel or is this just a remodel of the room? That's the only way I could take it in. And they were like, just a room remodel. I'm like, fine. Okay, do whatever you need to do. Keep it pushing. And literally it's keep it pushing. I don't have time. I didn't have time. I have 4 kids. 2 of them are teenage Black boys in Orange County. I need to pay attention to these things. That was what I needed to focus on. I didn't have time to focus on myself about things that I didn't have and things that I'm supposed to be doing. And we just keep pushing through, but also still taking those opportunities. The best opportunities that I had for success were in my work, which goes back always to the military piece, where the officer training, taking notes, being diligent, sticking to process, and being responsible for your outcome, taking responsibility. All of these things are part of me. Those are the things that attracted me to the military as far as the officer training. And then the teamwork piece was always a part of what I always did well, even in school. So while I was there at that job, I ended up getting better with myself, and stabilizing, getting mental health care, stop being the crazy mom. I came out of my room and started to interact with my kids. We still don't have money, but my time, it was the time that I had and the time that I was giving them. That was the most important. And my kids can literally tell you when I started taking medication. It went from like, batshit crazy screaming, like I've thrown out all of my kids' toys, like in a rage, because I told you to clean up the room and you didn't. I have the most regretful thing that I've ever done in a rage is to destroy my oldest son's well-earned swimming trophy because he didn't put it away. I crushed it in the driveway of our house. And I regret that like daily that I did that to him. And I think it's the parents sometimes when they do things to their kids and they don't admit it, that they've done it. I don't remember that. That didn't happen. If the kid tells you that it happened to them. Whoever was doing it, it might not have been you because you're still crazy, but you have to allow them to the acknowledgement of your failure as a parent in the moment. And I was failing. And that was the main reason that I went to therapy. I ended up going to therapy for like 15 years. Not so much because of myself, but how am I going to be the parent that I need to be for my children? Because my mom was a child who had me and could only do what she knew. And how was I also going to break this cycle in my family of women who continued to choose failure men that failed them and didn't support them the way they needed to be supported? How was I going to be the person to do that? And how was I going to raise these boys not to be that? And that was the determination for me to go to therapy, to find ways to resolve without the violence that I understood or had received, or that even my community uses. And I'm not saying I'm adverse to spanking the behind, but I'm talking about just the raging that I didn't have control over or even ability to acknowledge, and the raging that I had against myself and the inability to stabilize. In my workplace, I would get to a certain level and I'm like, how come I'm not elevating? I hit a ceiling every time. Kept hitting a seat. Why am I hitting a ceiling? And it comes to the acknowledgement of self. Like nobody's stopping me. It's like my kids would go to school and say, well, I got in trouble. They're always bothering me. The teacher's picking on me. I'm like, there's 2,000 people in the school. How is it that they're only finding you? And I had to take that same idea and also give that to myself. In a workplace of people that everybody's doing a job, why is it that you keep getting stopped along the way? What is it about you that is stopping you in your tracks? And I had to take responsibility for a lot of the things that weren't moving me forward. And those are like difficult conversations that you have with yourself about your own shortcomings. And at the time, honestly, looking for partners and the partners that I was choosing, I came to this realization that marriage or real partnerships were like a business, and that when you're choosing a business partner, you're choosing for the long term, depending on the business. So if you're choosing a long-term business partner, you're going to want to make sure that that business partner is stable. They have, they're financially sound. They have, integrity, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to turn myself the mirror and say, like, what's my resume? What am I bringing to the table? And at that time I was like, I am overweight, Black woman, 40, not living at her highest self and not tapping into her best self. And so that's my work. And stop worrying about looking for the business partner, become the business. And that is when I started my own work for myself. I also decided to stop worrying about becoming a part of other people's circle being friends with people or meeting people. I decided to stop worrying about that and to stand still. If you stand still, the people that are really for you will come to you. That way you don't have to build a circle. The circle will organically surround you and protect you. And you will have the people with you that will honestly be for you. So now we're fast forwarding to here on Whidbey Island, and I have brought all of those lessons that I had taken up to that point, up until I was 59, I'm 7 years. It's up to 52 years. I moved here when I was 52. I had not done any of the things in full that I had always been able to do. I had not been my full self. I had been parts of myself over time. And when I moved here, my kids were all grown. I left them in California. They were fully capable of maintaining on their own because I had raised them to be independent of me. Not independent of my love, but independent of me. I realized along the way that a lot of cultures train their kids to take care of their older family, or a lot of cultures take care of their older family. And we Americans, we kick our kids out and say, go take care of yourself. So my duality was, one, I told my kids, you have to learn how to take care of yourself. Because if I'm not here, who's going to take care of you? And as long as you keep a roof over your head, I will make sure that you have everything else you need. So that was like the safety net for them. And they had their own journeys to independence. But that allowed me here to start to grow and to build community here on Whidbey and to be myself. And so my name is Mary Elizabeth, but my whole life I was almost Mary, which I hated. Mary, I hated it. I tried to spell it different, Mary with an I, but Mary's just so boring. And I came here and I got to say, my name is Mary Elizabeth. Mary Beth, no, the whole thing. It's Mary Elizabeth because I am fully myself. I'm not two people anymore. I don't have to hide, or I don't feel like I do. And at this point, at this stage, I don't really care. My kids are grown. I've worked the job. I can always get a job. I can do what I need to do. As far as making a living, my husband is supportive. My husband loves me. In this relationship that I have now with that I call, normal. We are not in a relationship because he had to hide me. He was very much about me being my full self. His words were, I want to help you to be the essential Mary. And I think that's whenever we have conflict, that's always the basis of our relationship. That's the part about what's the basis? And that's the loving basis of things, that this human being only wanted the best for me from the beginning, the best that I could do for myself or the best that he could help me be. And so since I've been with my husband, I went back to school, I got my degree. It turns out those college units that I failed and I never went back to do, I only had 21 units to finish school. And so I ended up going back to school and crushing out 33 units in 1 year while having a full-time job and kids at home. And I wrote a book that I did all that. I did all of those things, but the poetry, the school, but I did that with this partner, this husband now that I have, who has supported me through so many of the things that I've accomplished, which I could have accomplished on my own, but to have someone there to be like, look what I did, and to know that being with that person made it a lot lighter. And I didn't have to carry as much of the burdens as I had along the way. And now that I'm here, I ended up all of that grinding that I did in the workplace as a parent, as a daughter, allowed me to come here, work under an agency, and then realize that I could have my own agency. And then I ended up buying an insurance agency and with no money. It worked out for me. And I can't tell you how that wasn't a plan. Oh, I'm going to plan, I'm going to do. No plan at all. Just that determination, again, tenacity, not being beat down by things. But then there's also the mental health piece. Through the years, the ups and downs of different medications. At one point, I was taking three different medications, and I think I was like 1,000 milligrams a day. And I didn't sleep until I think I was about 47. I had survived all my life on like 3 to 4 hours of sleep. Sometimes it had gotten to the point when I was super busy that I think the longest I've stayed awake is like 2.5 days. 2.5 days of not sleeping, not because I was like, oh, I'm insomnia. Like I'm just still doing stuff, writing a book, doing homework, feeding the kids, go get them, go to work. It's too late to go to sleep because I got to wake up. So I can't go to sleep. I got to keep going. So, and I think I've done that once in the last 7 years since I moved here. But I understand now my triggers. The medication allowed me to slow down, recognize my mental illness. The hardest part was accepting the mental illness because being crazy Mary was like a persona, Mary's so crazy versus like, how come you're not talking? How come you're not funny? How come you're not, you're not you? And then taking medication and being like, who is me? And what am I? And does this take away from me? And so the writing the poetry piece only started because I stopped taking medication. Once I started, after 2005, I was fully on meds. I couldn't write anything, not a thing. And when I came here, all of my triggers went away. California has all my triggers, all of the responsibilities of being a daughter, a mother, a worker, a friend, all of the pressures of performance are in California. All of the pressures of performance that are required of me, not that I require of myself. So it's always triggering. And when I moved here, I didn't have anything like that. I was choosing the things that I wanted to do. I was making the choices that I wanted to make in my life, in my relationship. I was emboldened, I think, to be free. And those habits that I had formed, I was really independent. I'm still very independent. You know that, Rachel. I don't need anybody to do anything. If I want to do something, then I will do it. I don't care about failure because somebody's always failing or someone's always going to say you're a failure. So it doesn't matter. Not worrying about the opinions of others has allowed me to move forward, has allowed me to own this business, and then moving forward and then tapping into my gift and then accepting the gift, just like accepting the mental illness, accepting myself as a poet has been a little bit of a difficulty, but also a journey of acceptance of who I am. And then the value of being a poet and how that shows up with other artists, and then valuing that gift, that was also a journey. Like we're constantly overcoming the weight of the things that we're not supposed to do, the weight of the things that we're told we can't do versus the lightness of saying what we can do. And so at this stage in life, after this journey that statistically I'm supposed to be, I'm supposed to be messed up, supposed to have had a stint in some mental health facility. My kids are supposed to be, messed up on drugs, and my relationships are supposed to be, statistically abusive. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here. And here I am, not a statistic. None of my children are drug addicts. None of my sons have prison records. I did that shit by myself for the most part to raise 3 Black sons in California. No gangs, no drugs. You can be, because I was the mom who would pull up and punch you in the face in front of your friends. I think in some ways the mental illness served me when it needed to. Because, man, your mom is crazy is like, I can't mess with you, man, because your mom is crazy. She'll show up, and she would. But at the same time, my sons now tell me the story of remembering how we got here, remembering how we made it through things, as they and all of my kids, when it's hard and they say it's hard, they remember that it was hard for me too, that it was hard and I still did it. And so they find strength in the lessons that they see in me, not that I'm still teaching them, but all of the things that I can do, am doing, are still lessons for my children. That life is heavy. You are not going to get through it without carrying some weight. But you have to forgive yourself along the way and accept that everything is in the moment, that you can only do what you know how to do when you have to do it. And it doesn't have to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. And the expectations that others put upon you because of their expectations of themselves when they're not living your life. I do this for all my haters because there's so many who expected me to stay in that fucking hotel on 5th and San Pedro, and who expected me to stay with the crackhead guy, expected me to not elevate above losing my home, who had expectations of my failure, except me and my kids. We never had an expectation of failure. They don't have an expectation of failure. And you can say, mental illness is a hindrance or it's an opportunity. We can always flip things and make them what they need to be and be honest about it and not hide it. You're crazy. Yes, I am. But I'm also smart. I'm also resilient. I am also self-aware. I am also compassionate. I love people, but I am also imperfect. And that's what this journey continues to show me, that it doesn't require perfection to get through. And anybody that tells you that it does, that's their failing.
You're speaking, and I have all these words that are going through my questions, words, comments going through my head, and things that I could say. But I think that there's a lot of power here in just letting the listeners sit with your story. I do want to ask you, because I told you I would give you the opportunity to share more about where we can find you and support you with your poetry. I know you're heavily involved in that on Whidbey Island, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about that now.
Okay, so I am now in 2024 became a poet on Whidbey. You can find me at Instagram at a poet on Whidbey and on Facebook. Currently, I am giving a workshop with the city of Oak Harbor to kids for expressive writing. And I just finished another workshop for kids last week, which was 3 days, which was great. It's lovely to see kids tap into their emotionality early on, because this mental illness thing is not like, oh, you woke up one day when you were like 12 or 15 or 25. And no, these are like getting our thoughts outside of our head. It's going to be so helpful for us to be able to express ourselves, which is a big part of the mental illness, a big part of anxiety and depression, when people don't feel they can even express themselves, even kids. And if we can get the kids to start, that just starts a fresh cycle. And what I found too is that this is also probably helpful for parents who aren't quite sure how to talk to their kids, and maybe have their own mental illness issues about journaling or writing. So that's where I am. I hope to have another start with adults as well. And sometimes I do stuff for fun, like poetry and sip. Everybody sit around and drink a glass of wine and write poems. So a poet on Whidbey at Instagram.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to have that in the show notes for anyone who wants to go support. As always, please, at least at a minimum, go follow on Instagram, engage with some posts. That's free. and it doesn't really require any effort, just a few clicks of a button. And most of you are on your phone all the time anyway. So go support someone on social media, because that, again, is free and takes very little effort. So Mary Elizabeth, I am so grateful for you coming on here and sharing your story. I think what I love the most about podcasting, like I said earlier, with people that I've known for a while, is I get to know you on a different level. And I don't think a lot of people go this deep into conversation with each other, because it usually just doesn't come up, right? And so to have the opportunity to know the deeper side of you, I'm incredibly grateful for that. So thank you on a personal note for the gift of sharing more about yourself with me, and also with everyone who listens to this podcast and will continue to, because there is so much power in a story, and there's always someone that can relate and now feels less alone because of you. So super grateful for you. And then to wrap up this episode, are there any last words or pieces of advice that you want to leave the listeners with today?
Nobody needs to believe in you except you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen in today. With your support, we are able to increase awareness of the mental health issues affecting service members and veterans today, with the goal of creating positive change. If you got value from this episode, please take 30 seconds to subscribe and share this episode within your own network. Until next time, remember, your story matters, your mental health matters, and your story doesn't end here.